The retreat out of Kentucky. From Perryville, we went to Camp Dick Robinson and drew 3 days' rations, and then set fire to and destroyed all those great deposits of Army stores which would have supplied the South for a year. We ate those rations and commenced our retreat out of Kentucky with empty haversacks and even emptier stomachs. We supposed our general and commissaries knew what they were doing and thought that at night we would again draw rations. But we didn't. The Yankee cavalry were harassing our rear guards. There was danger of an attack at any moment. No soldier was allowed to break ranks. We thought, well, surely we will draw rations tonight, but we didn't. We were marching for Cumberland Gap. The country had long since been made desolate by the alternating occupation of both armies. There were no provisions in the country. It had long ago been laid waste. We wanted rations, but we did not get them. Fourth day out, Cumberland Gap in the distance, a great indentation in the ranges of the Cumberland Mountains. The scene was grand, but grand scenery had little attraction for a hungry soldier. Surely we would get rations at Cumberland Gap. We toiled up the hill and, when halfway up, halt. March back down to the foot of the hill to defend against cavalry. I was hungry. A cavalryman was passing our regiment with a pile of scorched dough on the pommel of his saddle. I said, "Halt! I'm going to have a patty of that bread." "Don't give it to him! Don't give it to him!" was yelled from all sides. I cocked my gun and was about to raise it to my shoulder when he handed me over a patty of scorched dough, and every fellow in Company Aytch made a grab for it. I only got about 2 or 3 mouthfuls. About dark, a wild heifer ran by our regiment, and I pulled down on her. We killed and skinned her, and I cut off about 5 pounds of hindquarter. In 3 minutes, there was no sign of that beef left to tell the tale. We ate that beef raw and without salt. Only 8 miles now to Cumberland Gap, and surely we would get rations now. But we didn't. We descended the mountain on the southern side. No rations yet. "Well," I said, "this won't do for me. I'm going to hunt something to eat, General Bragg or no General Bragg." I turned off the road and struck out through the country, but had gone only a short distance before I came across a group of soldiers clambering over something. It was Tom Tuck with a barrel of sorghum he had captured from a loyal Union man. He was selling it out at $5 a quart. I paid my $5 and by pushing and shoving finally got my quart. I sat down and drank it. At first it was great. Then it wasn't so good. Then it wasn't worth a cent. I got sick and have never liked sorghum since. Along the route it was nothing but tramp, 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 and no sound or noise but that same inevitable, monotonous tramp, 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 uphill and downhill through long and dusty lanes, weary, worn out, and hungry. No cheerful song of a merry bird ever greeted our ears. It was always tramp, tramp, tramp. Now and then you might hear someone call out, "Close up," but aside from that, it was just the same tramp, tramp, tramp. I have seen soldiers fast asleep, and no doubt dreaming of home and loved ones while staggering along in their place in the ranks. I know that on many a weary night's march I have slept and slept soundly while marching along in my proper place in the company, stepping in time with the man in front of me. Sometimes, when we were worn out and exhausted, someone in the regiment would start a tune, and every man would join in. John Branch was usually the leader of the choir. He would begin with a beautiful tune. The words, as I remember them now, were, "Dear Paul, just 20 years ago." After that, he would launch into a lively, spirited air to the tune of "Old Uncle Ned." Now, reader, it has been 20 years since I heard it, but I can still recall a part of it. Here it is. There was an ancient individual whose name was Uncle Edward. He departed this life long ago, long ago. He had no hair on the top of his head where the hair ought to grow. His fingers were as long as the bamboo fishing poles used in the southern Mississippi. He had no eyes to see the beauties of nature. He had no teeth to chew his daily rations, so he had to let them pass him by. Walker Coleman would then take up the tune of, "I'm going to join the rebel band, fighting for my home." Now, reader, that is all I can remember of that very beautiful and soul-stirring song, but it would wake the boys up, and for a while they would step quicker and livelier. Then Arthur Fulgham would holler out, "All right, go ahead," and then mimic a train, "Toot, toot," as if the cars were starting. Puff, puff, puff. Then he would say, "Tickets, gentlemen, tickets, gentlemen," like he was a conductor on a train. That little episode would end, and then it was back to the same tramp, 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 all night long. Step by step, we continued to plod and nod and stagger and march, tramp, tramp, tramp. After a while, we would see the morning star rising in the east. Then the dim gray twilight. Soon we could make out the outline of our file leader. A little later, the outlines of trees and other objects. As it grew lighter and lighter, and day was about to break, we would hear, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo," from Tom Tuck's rooster. Tom carried a game rooster, which he called Fed, short for Confederacy, all through the war in a haversack. Then the sun would begin to shoot its slender rays across the eastern sky, and the boys would wake up and start laughing and talking, as if they had just risen from a feather bed, perfectly refreshed and happy. We would usually stop at some stream or creek around breakfast time, wash our hands and faces, and eat, if we had anything to eat. Then we'd resume our weary march. If we were halted for even 1 minute, every soldier would drop down and, resting on his knapsack, go to sleep. Sometimes the sleeping soldiers had to get up to let a general and his staff pass. But whenever that happened, the general always got a worse cursing than when Noah cursed his son Ham black and blue. I once heard Jesse Ely do just that. We marched on. The scene from a few days ago came unbidden to my mind. Tramp, tramp, tramp. The soldiers were marching. Where were my old friends and comrades whose names had been so familiar at every roll call, and whose voices once answered, "Here"? They now lay yonder at Perryville, unburied on the battlefield. They lay where they fell. More than 350 members of my regiment, the First Tennessee, were among the killed and wounded. 185 were slain outright on the battlefield. Who were they? Even then, I had to struggle to remember the names of all the slain of Company H alone. Their spirits seemed to march with us, but we knew that their souls were with God. Their bones, no doubt, still bleach upon the battlefield today. They had left their homes, families, and loved ones just a little over a year before, dressed in their gray uniforms, cheered on by those same friends. Now they lie yonder. No friendly hands closed their eyes in death. No kind and loving mother was there to shed a tear and say farewell to her darling boy. No sister's gentle hand wiped the death sweat from their brow. Noble boys, brave boys, they gave their lives willingly to their country's cause. Their bodies and bones were torn by the cruel missiles of war. They sleep the sleep of the brave. They gave their all for their country. We miss them from our ranks. There are no more hard marches or short rations for them. They accomplished all that could be asked of them. They are gone. Their names are soon forgotten. They are marked down in the roll book as killed, forgotten. We will see them no more, not until the last reveille on the morning of the final resurrection. Soldiers, comrades, friends, noble boys, farewell. We will meet no more on this earth, but someday up yonder we will have a grand reunion. Knoxville. The first night after crossing Cumberland Gap, I have forgotten the date, but I know it was very early in the fall of the year. We had had no frost or cold weather, and our marches all through Kentucky had been marked by very dry weather. It hadn't rained a drop on us the entire time. Around 4 o'clock in the morning it began to snow, and by the next morning the ground was covered with a deep snow. The trees, grass, and everything in the vegetable kingdom were still green. When we got back to Knoxville, we were the lousiest, dirtiest, most ragged-looking rebels you ever saw. I had been shot through the hat and the cartridge box at Perryville, and was still wearing both. The clothing I had on was all I owned in the world. William A. Hughes and I were walking up the street, looking at the stores and so on, when we met two of the prettiest girls I ever saw. They ran forward with smiling faces and seemed very glad to see us. I thought they were old acquaintances of Hughes, and Hughes thought they were old acquaintances of mine. We were soon laughing and talking like we'd known each other for years, when one of the young ladies said, "Gentlemen, there's a supper for the soldiers at the Ladies' Wote Association rooms, and we've been sent out to bring in all the soldiers we can find." We quickly replied, thank you, young ladies." And I picked out the prettiest one and said, "Please take my arm," which she did, and Hughes did the same with the other. We went down the street in that style. I imagine we looked like a funny sight. I know one thing. I felt good all over, and as proud as a boy in his first pair of pants. When we got to the supper room, those young ladies waited on us, and we felt as grand as kings. To you, ladies, I say, God bless you. Aytch. Sneak. Almost every soldier in the army, generals, colonels, captains, and privates, had a nickname. I honestly believe that if the war had lasted 10 years, we would have forgotten our real names. John T. Tucker was called Sneak. A.S. Horsley was called Don Von One Horsley. W. A. Hughes was Applejack. Green Reeves was Devil Horse. The surgeon of our regiment was Old Snake. Bob Brank was Count. The colonel of the 4th was Guidepost. E. L. Lansdowne was Lieutenant. Some were called Greasy, others Buzzard, some Hog, Brutus, Cassius, Caesar, Left Center, Boulder Dust, and Old Hannah. The nicknames were strange and unique, and once a man got a nickname, it stuck to him like the old man of the sea stuck to the shoulders of Sinbad the sailor. During our retreat, the soldiers grew very thirsty for tobacco. That was the word they always used. And sometimes they would come across an old field where tobacco had been cut and little suckers had sprouted again from the stalks. They would cut these off, dry them by the fire, and chew them. Sneak had somehow managed to get hold of a plug or two of real tobacco, and knowing he'd be begged for a chew, he cut it up into tiny little bits, about 1/4 of a chew each. Some fellow would say, "Sneak, please give me a chew of tobacco." Sneak would say, "I don't believe I have a piece left," and then he'd start feeling around in his pockets. He'd pull one hand out, check another pocket, then his coat pockets, and finally, way down in a corner of his vest pocket, he'd accidentally find a tiny bit, just big enough to make spit come. Sneak's pockets were always full. The boys eventually figured out his tricks and evasions, but John always looked as innocent as a pet lamb that had just pulled down a vine you'd carefully trained to climb the front porch. Ah, John, don't deny it now. I joined the cavalry. When we got to Charleston on the Hiwassee River, we found the First Tennessee Cavalry and the Ninth Battalion, both raised mostly in Maury County. We knew all the boys and had a good old-fashioned handshaking all around. Then I wanted to join the cavalry. Captain Asa G. Freeman had an extra horse, so I got on and joined the cavalry for several days. But nearly every passing cavalryman had some joke to crack. Here's a Webfoot trying to join the cavalry, with a bayonet on his gun and a knapsack on his back. I felt like I had stepped into the wrong pen, but still, I got to ride for 3 full days. I remember Mr. Willis B. Embry gave me a 5-pound package of Calicanic smoking tobacco, for which I was very grateful. I think he was quartermaster of the First Tennessee Cavalry, and he was one of the best and kindest men I ever knew. No one knew him without loving him. I was told later that he was killed by a group of Yankee soldiers even after he had surrendered and was begging them to spare his life. But he who watches the fall of the sparrow governs all things. Not even a sparrow falls to the ground without his will. That concludes the 8th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.